Welcome back. This is another DJX Chronicles. It is continuing with The Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. Last time I kind of cut it short. I was going to read all the way up to Treatise on the Steppenwolf, but instead I just read For Madmen Only. So this time I'm reading up to the Treatise on the Steppenwolf, but I won't be reading that till much later. I know it's confusing. Anyway, next. It is for madmen only, after all. My feet were wet, and I was chilled to the bone. Nevertheless, I stood waiting. Nothing more. But while I waited, thinking how prettily the letters had danced in their ghostly fashion over the damp wall and the black sheen of the asphalt, a fragment of my former thoughts came suddenly to my mind. The similarity to the track of shining gold which suddenly vanishes and cannot be found. I was freezing and walked on, following that track in my dreams, longing for that doorway to an enchanted theater, which was for madmen only. Meanwhile, I had reached the marketplace, where there is never a lack of evening entertainments. At every other step were placards and posters with their various attractions: ladies' orchestra, varietta, cinema ball, but none of these was for me. They were for everybody, for those normal persons whom I saw crowding every entrance. In spite of that, my sadness was a little lightened. I had had a greeting from an other world, and a few dancing colored letters had played upon my soul and sounded its secret strings. A glimmer of the golden track had been visible once again. I sought out the little ancient tavern where nothing had altered since my first visit to this town a good 25 years before. Even the landlady was the same as then, and many of the patrons who sat there in those days sat there still at the same places, before the same glasses. There I took refuge. True, it was only a refuge, something like the one on the spirits opposite the stairs. Here, too, I found neither home nor company, nothing but a seat from which to view a stage where strange people played strange parts. Nonetheless, the quiet of the place was worth something. No crowds, no music, only a few peaceful townsfolk at bare wooden tables. No marble, no enamel, no plush, no brass. And before each his evening glass of good old wine. Perhaps this company of habitués, all of whom I knew by sight, were all regular Philistines, and had in their Philistine dwellings their altars of the home dedicated to sheepish idols of contentment. Perhaps, too, they were solitary fellows who had been sidetracked, quiet, thoughtful toppers of bankrupt ideals, topers. Lone wolves and poor devils like me. I could not say either homesickness or disappointment or need of change drew them there. The married to recover the atmosphere of his bachelor days, the old official to recall his student years. All of them were silent, and all were drinkers who would rather, like me, sit before a pint of a lasser than listen to a ladies' orchestra Here, I cast anchor for an hour, or it might be two. With the first sip of Alsacer, I realized that I had eaten nothing that day since my morning roll. It is remarkable, all that men can swallow. For a good 10 minutes, I read a newspaper. I allowed the spirit of an irresponsible man who chews and munches another's words in his mouth, and give them out again, undigested, to enter into me through my eyes. I absorbed a whole column of it, and then I devoured a large piece, cut from the liver of a slaughtered calf. Odd indeed. That is quite odd. The best was the Alsacer. The freaking whiskey. Sorry, I am not fond, for every day at least, of racy, heady wines that diffused a potent charm, and having their own particular flavor. God damn it, I bet you that's a wine, isn't it? Classy bastard. Anyway, where was I? What I like the best is a clean, light, modest country vintage of no special name. One can carry plenty of it, and it has the good and homely flavor of the land, and of earth and sky and wood. A pint of Alsacer and a good piece of bread is the best of all meals. Okay, no, it has to be whiskey or something. Sorry. By this time, however, I had already eaten my portion of liver, an unusual indulgence for me, as I seldom eat meat. And the second pint had been set before me, and this too was odd, that somewhere in a green valley vines were tended by good, strong fellows, and the wine pressed so that here and there in the world, far away a few disappointed, quite drinking townsfolk and spirited or dispirited Steppenwolfs could sip a little heart and courage from their glasses. Okay, I'm stumped. It must be some sort of wine, because now he's talking about the fields of the vine. But I heard eating it with bread and stuff, and I was like, oh, come on now. It has to be like whiskey or something. Sorry. Getting distracted. I didn't really care whether all this was odd or not. It was good. It helped. It raised my spirits. As I thought again of that newspaper article and its jumble of words, a refreshing laughter rose in me, and suddenly the forgotten melody of those notes of the piano came back to me again. It soared aloft like a soap bubble, reflecting the whole world in miniature on its rainbow surface, and then softly burst. Could I be altogether lost when that heavenly little melody had been secretly rooted within me, and now put forth its lovely bloom with all its tender hues? I might be a beast astray, with no sense of its environment, yet there was some meaning in my foolish life. Something in me gave an answer, and was the receiver of those distant calls from worlds far above. In my brain were stored 1,000 pictures. Giotto's flocks of angels from the blue vaulting of a little church in Padua, and near them walked Hamlet and the garlanded Ophelia. Fair similitudes of all sadness and misunderstanding in the world. And there stood Giannozzo, okay, the aeronaut, in his burning balloon, and blew a blast on his horn. Attila, carrying his new headgear in his hand, and the Borobudur reared its soaring sculpture into the sky. And though all these figures lived in 1,000 other hearts as well, there were 10,000 more unknown pictures and tunes there which had no dwelling place but in me, no eyes to see, no ears to hear them but mine. The old hospital wall, with its gray-green weathering, its cracks and stains in which 1,000 frescoes could be fancied, who responded to it, who looked into its soul, who loved it, who found the charm of its colors, even delightedly, or delicately dying away. The old books of the monks, softly illuminated with their miniatures, and the books of the German poets of 200 and 100 years ago, whom their own folk have forgotten. All the thumbed and damp-stained volumes, and the works in print and manuscripts of the old composers. The stout and yellowing music sheets, dreaming their music through a winter sleep, who heard their spirited, their roguish and yearning tones, who carried through a world estranged from them a heart full of their spirits and their charm, who still remembered that slender cypress on a hill over Judea, that though split and riven by a fall of stone, yet held fast to life, and put forth with its last resources a new sparse tuft at top, who read by night above the Rhine the cloud script of the drifting mists. It was the Steppenwolf, and who, over the ruins of his life, pursued its fleeting, fluttering significance, while he suffered its seeming meaninglessness and lived its seeming madness, and who hoped in secret at the last turn of the labyrinth of chaos for revelation and God's presence. I held my hand over my glass when the landlady wanted to fill it once more and got up. I needed no more wine. The golden trail was blazed, and I was reminded of the eternal and of Mozart and the stars. For an hour I could breathe once more and live and face existence without the need to suffer torment, fear, or shame. A cold wind was sifting the fine rain as I went out into the deserted street. It drove the drops with a patter against the street lamps, where they glimmered with a glassy sparkle. And now, whither? If I had had a magic wand at this moment, I should have conjured up a small and charming Louis C's music room, where a few musicians would have played me 2 or 3 pieces of Handel or Mozart. I was in the very mood for it, and would have slipped the cool and noble music as God sipped nectar, Sounds like you needed Spotify. Uh, that's not a paid promotional. Anyway. Oh, if I had had a friend at this moment, a friend in an attic room, dreaming by candlelight and with a violin lying ready at his hand. How I should have slipped up to him in his quiet hour, noiselessly climbing the winding stair to take him by surprise. And then, with talk and music, we should have held heavenly festival throughout the night. Once, in years gone by, I had often known such happiness, but this, too, time had taken away. Withered years lay between those days and now. I loitered as I wandered my way homeward, turned up my collar, and struck my stick on the wet pavement. However long I lingered outside, I should find myself all too soon in my top-floor room, my makeshift home, which I could neither love nor do without. For the time had gone by when I could spend a wet winter's night in the open. And now my prayer was not to let the good mood of the evening had given me be spoiled, neither by the rain, nor by gout, nor by the Arcaria. And though there were no chamber music to be had, nor a lonely friend with his violin, still that lovely melody was in my head, and I could play it through to myself after a fashion, humming the rhythm of it as I drew my breath. Reflecting thus, I walked on and on. Yes, even without the chamber music and the friend. How foolish to wear oneself out in vain longing for warmth. Solitude is independence. It had been my wish, and with the years I had attained it. It was cold, oh, cold enough, but it was also still, wonderfully still and vast, like the cold stillness of space in which the stars revolve. From a dance hall there met me, as I passed by the stairs, of strains of lively jazz music, hot and raw as the steam of raw flesh. I stopped a moment. This kind of music, much as I detested it, had always had a secret charm for me. It was repugnant to me, and yet 10 times preferable to all the academic music of the day. For me, too, its raw and savage gaiety reached an underworld of instinct and breathed a simple, honest sensuality. Okay, one sec. I stood for a moment on the scent, smelling this shrill and blood-raw music, sniffing the atmosphere of the hall angrily, and hankering after it a little too. One half of this music, the melody, was all pomade and sugar and sentimentality. The other half was savage, temperamental, and vigorous. Yet the two went artlessly well together and made a whole. It was the music of decline, There must have been such music in Rome under the later emperors. Compared with Bach and Mozart and real music, it was, naturally, a miserable affair. But so was all our art, all our thoughts, all our makeshift culture in comparison with real culture. This music was at least sincere, unashamedly primitive, and childishly happy. There was something of the what? Hold on, give me 1 second. I had to quick edit this spot. Why would you say that? Okay. Okay. There was something of the lower class in it, and something of the American, who, with all. Oh my god, no, that's worse, that's worse. Hold on. I can't. Alright. I can't say that word, so I'm just gonna move past. But there was something of the African in it, and something of the American, who, with all his strength, seems so boyishly fresh and childlike to us Europeans. Was Europe to become the same? Was it on the way already? Were we the old connoisseurs? I know that word. The old connoisseurs, the reverers of Europe, as it used to be, of genuine music and poetry, as once they were. Nothing but a pig-headed minority suffering from complex neurosis, whom tomorrow would forget or deride. Was all that we called culture, spirit, soul, all that we called beautiful and sacred, nothing but a ghost long dead, which only a few fools, like us, took for true and living? Had it perhaps, indeed, never been true and living? Had all that we poor fools bothered our heads about never been anything but a phantom? I was now in the old quarter of the town. The little church stood up dim and gray and unreal. At once, the experience of the evening came back to me. The mysterious Gothic doorway, the mysterious tablet above it, with the illuminated letters dancing in mockery. How did the writing run? Entrance not for everybody, and for madmen only? I scrutinized the old wall opposite in the secret hope that the magic night might begin again. The writing invite me. The madman. The little doorway gave me admittance. There, perhaps, lay my desire, and there, perhaps, would my music be played. The dark stone wall looked back at me with composure, shut off in a deep twilight, sunk in a dream of its own. And there was no gateway anywhere, and no pointed arch, only the dark, unbroken masonry. With a smile, I went on, giving it a friendly nod. Sleep well. I will not awake you. The time will come when you will be pulled down or plastered with covetous advertisements. But for the present, there you stand, beautiful and quiet as ever, and I love you for it. From the black mouth of an alley a man appeared, with startling suddenness, at my elbow. A lone man, going his homeward way with weary step. He wore a cap and a blue blouse, and above his shoulders he carried a signboard fixed on a pole, and in front of him an open tray suspended by straps, such as peddlers carry at fairs. He walked on, wearily in front of me without looking around. Otherwise, I should have bidden him a good evening and given him a cigar. I tried to read the device on his standard, a red signboard on a pole in the light of the next lamp, but it swayed to and fro, and I could decipher nothing. Then I called out and asked him to let me read his placard. He stopped and held his pole a little steadier. Then I could read the dancing, reeling letters. Anarchist evening entertainment. Magic theater. Entrance not for everybody. I've been looking for you, I shouted with delight. What is this evening entertainment? Where is it? When? He was already walking on. Not for everybody, he said dully with a sleepy voice. He had had enough. He was for home, and on he went. Stop, I cried, and ran after him. What have you got there in your box? I want to buy something from you. Without stopping, the man felt mechanically in his box, pulled out a little book, and held it out to me. I took it quickly and put it in my pocket, while I felt for the button of my coat to get out some money. He turned in at a doorway, shut the door behind him, and disappeared. His heavy steps rang on a flagged yard, then on wooden stairs, and then I heard no more. And suddenly, I too felt very tired. It came over me that I must be very late. A high time to go home. It must be very late. I walked on faster, and following the road to the suburb, I was soon in my own neighborhood, among the well-kept gardens, where in clean little apartment houses, behind lawn and ivy, are the dwellings of officialdom and people of modest means. Passing the ivy and the grass and the little fir trees, I reached the door of the house, found the keyhole and the switch, slipped past the glazed doors, and the polished cupboards, and the potted plants, and unlocked the door of my room. My little pretense of a home, where the armchair and the stove, the ink pot and the paint box, Novalis and Dostoevsky, awaited me, just as do the mother or the wife, the children, maids, dogs, and cats, in the case of more sensible people. I'm just a dirty guy with a dog and everything. Actually, yeah, let's not, remember that I said that. Yeah. Let's just, wipe that from your memory, please. I'm sorry, baby, I'm almost done. Continuing. As I threw off my wet coat, I came upon the little book and took it out. It was one of those little books, wretchedly printed on wretched paper, that are sold at fairs. Were you born in January? Or how to be how to be 20 years younger in a week? However, when I settled myself in my armchair, I put on my glasses. It was with great astonishment and a sudden sense of impending fate that I read the title on the cover of this companion volume to fortune-telling booklets, Treatise on the Steppenwolf, not for everybody. I read the contents at a sitting with an engrossing interest that deepened page by page. Alright, speaking of sittings, this sitting is now concluded. I will come back next time with the treatise on the Steppenwolf, as dear Herman Hesse already suggested. But I'll see you next time. Please like and subscribe if you want to. And I hope this not for everybody YouTube channel gets some views and crap. Anyway, see you next time. I'm done doing that.